Hey guys, welcome to PC Dan's videos. Today we're going to be talking about supersets. So supersets are simply two exercises back to back. Now these can be a range of different formats, and today we're going to be talking about those different formats and how it benefits you. So the first thing we're going to be talking about is what we call agonist versus antagonist supersets. So these are two exercises done back to back using opposing movements and therefore opposing muscle groups. The classic example would be a bicep curl versus a tricep pushdown, or a dumbbell press versus seated row. So taking a dumbbell press versus seated row, for example, you'll be doing a simple dumbbell press where you'll be using your pec major, anterior head of your delts and your triceps. In the pulling action, doing a seated row, you'll be using the complete opposite muscles, such as your posterior head of your delts, traps and biceps. So in this case you've got two different movements using the opposing muscle groups. Now the reason this can be of great benefit is for a number of reasons. One, if you want to maximize your time. So what happens is when you're doing a dumbbell chest press, you're using certain muscles, and then without pause you go straight into the opposite movement, your seated row, and your chest is relaxing and recovering whilst you're doing the other movement, and vice versa. So you go back and forth non-stop. So you'll do one set chest press, one set seated row, one set chest press, seated row, chest press, seated row, and go back and forth until you've done your 4 to 6 sets. Now this is also very beneficial because when one muscle contracts, the opposing must relax. So say for example, the bicep contracts, so it lengthens, and it contracts, and as this contracts, this must lengthen. So watch what happens when I contract my bicep. See, it contracts, so it lengthens, and if I contract that, the other side lengthens. So what happens is, when you're doing one movement and contracting the other one's lengthening, giving it a fairly good stretch and allowing blood flow to come in, speeding up recovery periods even more. So that's a little hint that not many people actually think about when doing supersets. The other type of superset you would do would be two exercises contracting the same muscle group. The best way to do it is to do a compound movement into an isolation movement. For example, a squat into a leg press. Not leg press, sorry, leg extension. So you're doing a squat, which is a compound movement, meaning multiple joints, multiple muscles working. So this is your big, strong, heavy set. Then you isolate your specific muscle that you're targeting, in this case being your quads, and just knock out whatever you got left just by isolating that muscle. Then have a rest, and then you'll go back into it again. So you're simultaneously doing 2 sets back to back and then having a rest, and this is speeding up time. So that's another way of doing it. Now that's a more professional way of doing it, I believe, because you are targeting the same muscle in 2 completely different ways. The other third way of doing a superset is by doing a movement where you're contracting the muscle in the way it's meant to be, which is pulling on the muscle's point of insertion, and then doing another exercise using the same muscle. So it's a similar superset to the one we spoke about before, but now targeting the same muscle in a completely different way, which is contracting the muscle, pulling on its point of origin. So let's have a look at the best example I can think of, and this would probably be a stiff-legged deadlift into a hamstring curl. So when you're doing a stiff-legged deadlift, you're leaning forward, and instead of using the bottom of your hamstring to lift your tibia bone, that part is now stationary and is now pulling on your pelvis into anterior tilt, pulling your body upright, so the hamstring is pulling on the opposite side, where then you go into a hamstring curl and it's pulling on your tibia fibula. So it's the same muscle but in contracting in 2 different ways. Another way of doing it is doing a dumbbell chest press into a push-up, because when you're doing a dumbbell chest press, your body's stationary on the bench but your arms are moving, so the chest is pulling that way in a leverage action. But then when you're doing a push-up, it's the complete opposite, because your hands are stationary and it's your body that's going up and down, which means the same muscle is contracting in the complete opposite way. Another way of looking at this type of superset will be doing a chin up supersetted into a lat pull down. Because in a chin up, your hands are stationary, your body's moving up and down, but in a lat pull down, your body's stationary and your arms are moving up and down. So it's the same muscle contracting, but in two completely different ways because of the movement patterns. So that's the third way of doing it. So let's just have a look at those different supersets over again. The first superset will be agonist, antagonist. So you're using two different muscles, opposing muscles, doing opposing movement groups. And this is a typical type of superset. A more professional superset will be to do two different exercises back to back, targeting the same muscle, so not different muscles, to the same muscle, but in the same movement, or two ways in which the muscle was meant to be made. And then you're doing two different supersets targeting the same muscle, allowing the muscle to contract in two completely different ways, different movement patterns. So that's a little rundown on different types of supersets that you can do. Very, very beneficial for training, especially in the fat loss stage where you're trying to do high rep work, try and knock out whatever you got left. Really good for fat loss because, again, for high rep work you're using a lot of stored muscle glycogen to do multiple reps. Not so good for strength because you can't focus on just putting all your charged energy into one big heavy lift because you're doing multiple reps, because you're doing two sets back to back. And most importantly, it's amazing for time management. So if you're running late to do the gym, you can look at different combos and do supersets to speed up your time and still get the workout done in an appropriate manner. Talk to you soon.